Okay, good morning, everybody. Parshat Beshalach. First of all, I want to dedicate the shir for Refuah Shlema for Barry Weiss, Doreen's husband. Should have a Refuah Shlema. Beryl Ben, having a brain freeze. Beryl Ben Freda. Should be a Refuah Shlema. He's coming along. Yes Hashem, we'll hope for the best. And our learning should be as was. Okay, first piece is from Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. The parsha, so much in this parsha, all these parshot of Yetziat Mitzrayim, Vayomer Mazot Asinu. So after Paro says, get out, go, leave, go daven, do what you wanted to do. You wanted to daven, go offer your sacrifices, and then after they left, so all of his advisors said to him, Vayomru Mazot Asinu. Kishalachnu at Bnei Yisrael Meratzenu. What did we do? What were we thinking? Right? So Yaakov asked a simple question. I don't understand what they're thinking. V'chi shachachu kvar et hamakot. Did they forget about the plagues? Ad she'tamayim heim b'toim mazot asinu. What do you mean, what did we do? We had enough, right? They didn't really send up Bnei Israel because they wanted to send up Bnei Israel. But after the Makkos. So he says, So I want to provide two answers. One is kind of a psychological answer, a human nature answer, and the other is a svara. In the whole event, right? Kind of a logical thing. Okay, so let's see what he says. Kan gilsalanu haTorah ad kama haratzon mateh or mitaeh and haseichel hayashar. You see from this how a person can fool himself. How what you want to do, the ratzon, what a person wants to do, is going to distort reality. To the extent that you forget what happened in the last 7 days, right? V'gam mitat haben habechor, the death of the firstborn. What a tragedy they went through. V'kol churban haaretz, and the whole Mitzrayim was like, if you see the pictures of Gaza today. That's apparently what Mitzrayim must have looked like. It was completely devastated, right? Haterem Teda ki avda Mitzrayim. Didn't they know if Mitzrayim was finished? Was out, right? So what do you mean? What did we do? Maybe they should have thought of having a plan. Let the United States come in and rebuild Mitzrayim, right? V'im yesh rak petach katan. If there's just a little tiny window, right? Yavo ratzon v'ita taseichel. So your desire is going to distort seichel. We're talking about when the Egyptians said after they send out Bnei Israel, Paro says, get out, go offer your sacrifices, leave. And then they say, Masina, what do we do? What do we do? So we're talking here about, we don't understand. He's asking a question. What do you mean? What did they do? Why would they even after the Makkos, the destruction, the devastation of Mitzrayim? Why would they have second thoughts? So the first thing he says is that a person very simply, human nature, that a person can very simply distort reality with his Yetzer Hara. After these 10 plagues. Where it was clear to everybody in the world that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the master of the universe, right? And the determining factor of everything that happens in the world, right? Which was, of course, one of the main purposes of the plague was to drive that fact home, right? Kibal Tzafon Nishar, we call Elohei Mitzrayim. Rashi points out that only one of their idols remained, called Baal Tzafon, right? So they said, listen, v'toehu, they made a mistake, ki hu shesagar aleim hamidbar. You know what's going to happen here? That they went around, they went a circuitous way, because Baal Tzafon is running the show here, right? They're not going where they're supposed to go, right? They're going right to the sea, right? So it's our God that's doing this. V'toehu, right? V'halo roehu ate et amud anan vet amud ha'esh. They still saw the miraculous cloud that protected Bnei Israel and the fire that protected Bnei Israel day and night. Ki Hashem holech lifneim, that God was going in front of them. Va'af al pikein, that notwithstanding, lo yirav lo yachet, they weren't afraid, right? So they were convinced that their idol, after everything that happened, right? The person can distort reality, right? Va'achar kach kisheroa shehem mitbaka haylo lachzor lacharav. So, ki halo roehu b'chush ki shelo kederach hatevahu. This was not. They said this is an unnatural thing, right? Aval pikein hu holech achareim b'yam, and they ran after them into the sea. Tachat hakir hanatui shel hamayim, underneath the wall of water. Ha'omnim b'neis, which is standing up miraculously. Why? Elishakan gamkein nishar lo petach. You know why this is happening? Ki halon min hashev ruach kadim. There was a strong east wind, right? That's what Russia. There was a strong east wind. So bevadai haruach hasakim. So clearly the wind did this, right? So we're going to get through and we're going to kill them, right? And this is clearly because God really wants us to capture them and bring them back. Now, this is an absurdity. The first one obviously is absurd that the idol's doing it, but this is also from a natural perspective. It's absurd because the sea split in two directions, so you needed an east wind and a west wind, not one wind. The east wind would only take one of the sides of the sea split, not the other side, right? So from a pragmatic perspective, it's nonsense. So that's the first thing he says, that this is mamash, a lesson in human nature. Don't deceive yourself, right? Deal with don't confuse me with the facts. That's really what happened here. Don't confuse me with the facts. That's why they went back after Bnei Israel. Secondly, he says a svara. He says some kind of a logical thing. Yesh lomar lefi masha katavti leil, based on something I said in Parshat Shemot, which we've never done. Shebemet, what he writes over there, mitchila ratzah kodesh baruch hu sheYisrael yatzu rak u'shloshet yom. Remember, and this was something that Moshe asked for on his own, but the Rebbe Shem agreed. Let them go out for 3 days. What was the idea of going out? Lamidbar lizbach l'Hashem, to have we said like a kind of a Shabbaton, a retreat. Although I think I pointed out in the past that that's a Catholic term. Jews don't have retreats, although you see that people advertise them. The Catholics call it a retreat. We call it a Shabbaton. We should call it a forward. It's not a retreat. It's going forward, right? So in any case, that's what the Rebbe Shem had in mind. They should go for 3 days. And they realize now that's all the Rebbe Shem wanted to do. So they strengthen themselves in this 3-day Shabbaton, or if it's not over Shabbos, whatever, a 3-day gathering, right? They'd be able to come back to Egypt. This is what the Rebbe Shem wanted. This is what, right? To be enslaved ad kalot arba meot shana, to the end of the 400 years, shegazar aleim bebrit bein habtarim, which HaKadosh Baruch Hu decreed, right? It was supposed to be 400 years, right? Aval mikivan sheparo sirev lasotke, but Paro didn't do it. He didn't let them go. L'chein, this is what they were thinking. This is their thinking. Since Paro didn't let them go, l'chein huchrach HaKadosh Baruch Hu lahakshot aleim hashivut. So therefore, God had to tighten the vice. He had to make, and it was at that point, it became much heavier servitude, right? He made things harder for them. Now they had to make their own bricks, right? Because God would take them out after 210 years, right? So he made it, so in other words, he kind of condensed 400 years into 210 years, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was going to do. Ayin Sham, so look, I should be arti b'dorma. I went into this, I'm not going to go into further. Well, if he said, but based on this idea, Nira, Lomar, HaKadosh Baruch Hu really had in mind 400 years, right? Shahamitzrim Dimu, the Egyptians concluded, Ki mikivan shemakeu Hashem, that since God has been making them suffer here, right, allowing us to do what we do, mistama eno makbid al hashibut. He doesn't object to the servitude, right? He didn't take them out. They can't handle 400 years. He made it harder. He let us make it harder for them, right? Ela mishum shemanam milatzeit lamidbar lavdo. But he was going to only let them go out for 3 days, right? 3 days. Zeu ikar hakpeda. This is the problem here, right? L'chein keshe'amar paro leMoshe v'Aaron, when he says to Moshe and Aaron, lachar maket b'chor, after the firstborn tragedy for him, kumu u'tzeu mitoch ami, get out, and he added hosif. Gamken, he added ulechu ivdu et Hashem kidivreichem. Go serve your God the way you asked. Meaning what? Paro assumed they're going to go out for 3 days and they're going to come back, right? Kilomar shepatach lo petach shel charata. So here, Paro is saying to himself, you know what? I told them to go worship him. They have to come back. God wants them here. God wants them here. Aval haya yirei lahatnot mefurash. He didn't say beferish to them. Shemeshalchem rak betanai she'eshuv Mitzrayim. I'm sending you out that you should return. Why? The chashash, because he suspected pen yishto va'az yamutu kulam. Maybe they would die. I don't know exactly what he means here. But v'zeu bira pasukam. But this is what the pasuk means. The tamu mazor asinu. What did we do? Ki shalachnu b'nei Yisrael me'avdenu. That kolomar, in other words, we sent them. Hayalanu l'shalchem rachlet kufasha shlosh yamim. We only should have sent them out for the 3 years. That's all they asked for. Why are we giving them more than they asked for? Right? Moshe keeps saying shlachet ami, but when he was specific about it, it was for 3 days. Right? So he convinced himself that that's all they wanted. Kadeshi achogu b'midbar, so they'd have this celebration to strengthen their faith. V'az yachzaru v'yishtabdu etzlenu, and then they'd come back. Hainu shehitcharatu ad shechrurum legamri. Now he had charata that he let them go completely. So there's two explanations of why the Egyptians had a kind of charata. They felt they did a wrong thing by letting them go. Okay, let's go over the page. Let's do number 3 first. What? Dochik kasha. The question is answered. So, Me'ein Beit HaShoeva, number 3, this is from Rav Schwab. Vayasev Elokim et ha'am, this is at the beginning of the Parsha, right? He took us a circuitous way, Derech HaMidbar, the desert, Yam Suf, towards the Yam Suf, v'chamushim, alu b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim, and the Jewish people were armed when they went out. Pirush Rashi. Rashi explains, what does chamushim mean? Now, there are lots of interpretations on chamushim. Chamushim mechumashim. He says, echad michamisha yatsu. Only 1/5 of the Jewish people left Mitzrayim. V'dalid chlakim metu shloshet yemei afela. And 4/5 of Bnei Israel died in the darkness. Now, you realize what that means. You're talking about 3 million people. Because when we talk about 600,000 going out, that's only males from 20 up to 60 or 80, whatever you want to say. It doesn't count women, doesn't count children. So the total package here, so that means that there were 4/5 of the Jewish people, millions of people, who, according to the textual reading of this medrash that Rashi brings, that were Rishoyim, that were undeserving of the Exodus, right? And he says, Makoro b'mechilta, it's a medrash, it's a medrash halacha we have. V'chamushim alu echad michamisha. They went out 1/5. V'yeshomrim echad michamishim. Right? Some say 1/5. Some say 1/50. V'yeshomrim echad michamesh meot. 1 out of 500. Ayin sham. Which if you do this math, bevadai shedavar zeh tamumot. This is very, very hard to swallow. Right? Shalafi divrei. According to these opinions in the Medrash, nimtzu shemetu karov l-30 million or 300 million bnei Yisrael kodam hagula. Hundreds of millions of Jews died before the Gula, right? V'od tamua, also strange, shalakol hadayot, according to all the opinions, nevdu kama milyonim Yisrael. However, whichever mathematical equation you use, there are a couple of million, let's say 3 million. Im kein hayazeh ason umakeh gedol yoter mikol hamakot shesavlu b'Mitzrayim atmeh. This was worse than anything that happened in Mitzrayim, right? So this is a major, and it's like kind of hidden, right? And it was done, during the plague of darkness, so the Egyptians would not see that Jews were killed, and they would bury them during that 3 days of darkness, right? The Jews, right? The other ones, but it's almost ridiculous, right? So listen to what he says. V'nira lefaresh davar zeh al pi divrei Rashi al pasuk. I want to take a different take on this, and I want to do it based on another comment of Rashi at the beginning of Bereshit, right? When Cain and Hevel, one brother kills the other, right? And the Rebbeinu Shalom says, "Kol demei achicha tzoakim elai min adama." The blood of your brothers, plural, are davening to me from the grave. So Pirshu Chazal, the rabbis in the Gemara say in Sanhedrin, Demei achicha dimu v'dam zariotav. Not only the blood of his brother, but the blood of his future children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, etc., etc. V'chein yesh lomar kan. In other words, that's the tragedy, right? That's the tragedy. Not just that he killed his brother, but what could have come from his brother, the future generations. So he wants to say this is what's going on here. Shebemet lo metu el yichidim. Truth be told, there were not many who died who were shahayu b'nei Yisrael. Kama rishoyim gemurim. There were some very wicked people. Remember, the Jews were at the 49th level. The Jews were still worshiping idols, right? The Jews were worshiping idols still in Mitzrayim. So there were certain Jews who didn't want to let go, right? So Shelo hayu ro'uyim l'geula. They weren't fit to be redeemed. Okay, a few. V'hei metu b'shloshet yemei afela. And they died during the 3 days of darkness. Aval imahayu nisharim b'chayim, if they would have been alive, if these Jews would have stayed alive, hayu molidim kama milyonim anashim b'meshech hadorot. How many millions would come from these people, right? V'al zeh nechleku balei hamedrash. And this is the machlokas in the medrash, right? Imahayu yotzei chalatzatam arba pamim shishim. Was it 4 times 60, or 600,000, or 40 times, 49 times arba meot v'tisha pamim? Right, however you want. That's the math, right? V'yitaken shenechleku eich la'asot hacheshbon. So just how do you make that cheshbon of 4/5, right? Im mishat yitziat Mitzrayim ad binyan beit hamikdash. How far do you go? You count the number of Jews from the time of Yitziat Mitzrayim until the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash. So that's millions and millions and millions, right? Oh, at sof kol adorat, or at sof kol adorat, or eternally, until ad hayom hazeh, right? Where you're into billions, right? Ad la'ezeh shiur acher, right? So makes a lot of, what he's saying makes a lot of sense, right? Because I'll tell you why he says. V'horecha brura l'dvarenu. And I want to sort of prove it to you. He mima shapirish Rashi says shemetu shloshet yemei afela. They died during the 3 days of darkness. V'lama lo metu b'zman acher. Why not at another time, as we said, Rashi? Ela shelo ratzah Kodesh Baruch Hu sha'mitzrim yargishu shemetu b'bnei Yisrael. He did not want the Jews to think, did not want the Egyptians to think that Jews were dying also, right? To give them that pleasure, right? Ulechein mesu v'gam nikbaru. They died and they were buried b'shas hafela, during the darkness. V'lo girshu hamitzrim klal, right? Ha'adoram. And the Egyptians didn't realize that they were missing. V'amnam, but listen, I have a question. Im nefaresh et hamedrash kepshuta. If you do this medrash just the way it is, the Parshat text of the medrash, 4/5 of the Jewish people, millions of Jews, sherubam shel bnei Yisrael metu ba'oto tkufa, the overwhelming majority of the Jewish people died. Bivadai efshar shelo hirgishu hamitzrim b'chisaron atzum zeh. It's impossible to say that the Egyptians would not pick up on this. I mean, you have 3 million people dying. The Egyptians aren't going to hear about it, right? Ela davar barur, k'moshe pirashna. It's clear the way I'm saying it. It has to be this way. Shebemet rak yichidim metu. Only a few people died. V'lo haya murgash chisoron gadol begufo shel klal Yisrael. And it wasn't a heavy physical loss of klal Yisrael, right? Also, how could they bury in 3 days 3 million people, right? And they're not going to hear about it, right? But let me give you an example, he says. It's a bristling example. Im Omrim, we just had, right, 80th Holocaust Memorial Day, right, for the Kedoshim. Im Omrim Natzim Ha'arurim Yamach Shemam. If we say that the Nazim Hargu Shisha Milyonim Me'achenu B'nei Yisrael Lifnei Nun Shana. He wrote this 30 years ago, right? 20 years ago. So 30 years ago, he says, if he's talking about 50 years, we're talking about 80 years now. Let's say they killed 600,000 Jews, right? Or if they killed Hargu Shisha Milyonim. Let's say they killed 6 million, right? Hayom Anu Yicholim Lomar Shehargu Aseret Milyonim. So today we say there were tens and tens of millions of Jews that were killed. So we know that there are, let's say, 600,000 and probably more, right? Well, we could only prove approximately 6 million, right? We proved 6 million, right? There were probably more than 6 million, but we say 6 million, right? So let's say, we didn't say 6 million, right? But if 6 million died, right? How many would be there today? Shari b'meshech hachamishim shana or hashmonim shana. For us, 80 years later, achronim, the last 80 years, hayukol hanehargim parim v'rabim b'nim u'b'nei banim. All of the 6 million Jews who died would have had children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. That's the enormity of the tragedy of this, the evil empire of the Nazis. V'chein b'shanim habaot. B'kol shana, each year, yitrabeh hamispar shel chal le'imenu. So the number would keep increasing. V'damam, v'dam zaram tzakim el Hashem. And their blood and the blood of their future generations were crying out to the Ribbono Shel Olam. Look what Klal Yisrael could have looked like. Vehu yitbarach yinkom le'einenu nikmat dam avodav hashavuch. And Kodesh Baruch Hu, it takes nakama for all of the tragedy and the Jews that were lost, and look at now what what Klal Yisrael has become. It's not an answer, but it is at least a nakama. It is a kind of comfort zone that the Kodesh Baruch Hu gave us, that we were able to rebuild stories of survivors and how they rebuilt their lives. They came here with nothing. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, take what's happened today with the hostages. This girl who, what was her name? Armon? I forget. What? Hagam, right? Look at. And the other girl said, if not for her, she made it. She gave us strength. This is a girl who came from not from a religious background, right? She decided to keep Shabbat. She started to keep Shabbos. She kept Shabbos. She fasted on Tisha B'Av. She found a sitter, right? She found a sitter in somewhere, right? Who knows how the Palestinians might have taken it. We saw they took menorahs, they took all kinds of things. And at the same time, her mother, unbeknown to each other, also started to keep Shabbos, right? I mean, the strength of the, Mika Amcha Yisrael, Mika Amcha Yisrael. So that's our nakama for all these terrible, terrible things that that we have to deal with. Okay, now go to number 2 on the sheet. I left it for the end because I have a piece that I did not put in that I'm going to do with you afterwards, a kind of a PS to this. This is from a sefer called Chamin b'Motzei Shabbat, which we have used in the past. It means a hot meal, Motzei Shabbos, like a good Malava Malka, a banquet Malava Malka. It's the name of a sefer that the students, the Talmid, the Hasidim of the Tolner Rebbe put out. The Tolner Rebbe is a very, very prominent Hasidic Rebbe today in Yerushalayim. A very spiritually popular Hasidic Rebbe, a very brilliant man. People come from the secular world, businessmen, politicians, people go to him to discuss for aces. Very special person, okay? He has a fascinating history also. His roots actually go back to Toronto, and so on. There's a lot more to say about him. I believe he went to Nativ Meir High School, which was the only Dati Leumi high school in Yerushalayim many moons ago, right? So there's a story here, right? But his grandfather was the Tolner Rebbe, and his father didn't want to be the Tolner. He became the Tolner Rebbe. So the rest is really something special. Now here, on the Parsha. Ksiv, it says in the Torah, Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, Ma titzak alai. Daber al b'nei Yisrael v'yitaru. Moshe comes and he davens to the Rebbeinu Shalom, save us, right? We're finished here. So what does God say to him? What does the Kodesh Baruch say to him? What are you talking to me for? Why are you davening to me? Go speak to Bnei Yisrael. Madua shelo yitzak Moshe Rabbeinu. I have a question. I mean, there's a lot of interpretations on this pasuk. Like the OUisrael has we maybe have done it in the past. A lot of interpretation what he really meant, but listen to what he's going to say, something which I find very special, right? First they ask the question, Madua shelo yitzak Moshe Rabbeinu. Why shouldn't he daven to the Rebbeinu Shalom, right? What do we do when we have tzoros? We daven to Hashem, we daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we say to him. So what do you have a time on Moshe Rabbeinu for? Hello, Am Yisrael netumnim be'eit tzara. Klal Yisrael was in a terrible matzah, terrible situation. So why not daven? Lama lo titzak, right? Listen to what he says. There are really 10 verbs in Lashon Kodesh for prayer, right? Tzaka, right, which it means to shout, right? To desperation. That's one of 10, right? Ubir Rabbeinu HaKodesh. This is what he quotes as Pnei Yeshua, which I think was a great uncle or I'm not sure exactly of the lineage here, but the Pnei Menachem, Besifro HaKodesh in his sefer, I quote, Ki hagam shehaya lo litpalel. It's true. Moshe should have davened. Mikol makom lo haya tzarich lehitpalel b'loshen tza'aka. But he shouldn't have made tza'aka, screaming, desperation, demanding with desperation. That's the connotation of the word tza'ak, right? Ela b'loshen rina. He should have davened with rina, with joy. Lefamim rina mo'ilah. Sometimes praying with joy will make all the difference in the world, right? And he says, Gam rina hi achat mi aseret lishonot shel tefillah. The word rina is one of the 10 verbs for tefillah, one of the 10 nouns to describe tefillah, prayer, tefillah, tza'aka, it's also a noun, rina, it's a noun, joy. V'chein k'tiv etzel Yehoshaphat, he quotes from Tanakh, Shebo hagoyim lemilchama b'machane gadol. The Jewish people were being threatened. Yehoshaphat, the army was being threatened by a large army. Va'amar lo hanavi Yecheskel. So what does Yecheskel tell the Melech Yisrael? What does he tell him? He tells the king, She'inatzech b'milchama. Don't worry, you're going to be successful. Ube'et sheyatzu b'milchama. And when they went out, Hitchilu HaMeshorim, the singers, Lomar, Hallel. What did they daven? They daven Hallel, right? Uksiv John, what does it say in Hallel? It says it rather in the Tanakh and Divrei Yamim. Ube'et hechalu berina utehila vayinagvu. That they daven with rina, with joy and tehillah and praise of Hashem. Vayinagvu, and they defeated the enemy. Shahaita legoyim mapala gedolah v'Yisrael nitzchum. That the goyim had, the enemies of the Jewish people had a devastating loss, and Bnei Yisrael were victorious. Umukach, what you see from that, sheyesh tefillah b'loshen rina. Tefillah is rina. Ubevada shetzarach levakesh me'Hashem yisborach v'tzarach lipalel. Without a doubt, Moshe should be davening. We all should be davening when there's an eight tzara, right? Aval biyot b'chiyut u'b'simcha, but with light, with being alive, with chiyut, right? With confidence, u'b'simcha, and joy. He says in the next column, lebedik, he says in Yiddish. It should be a lively davening, right? Below im tzaka, almost like today's Karlebach minion, right? A big thing, the Karlebach minion, right? So, ve'eno tzarach liot nishbar bekirbo. Don't be broken. Don't come to me as a broken person, right? With tzaka. Ki im lehefech, the opposite, lead palel b'chiyut uberina. Come, go and what do you matzi tzaka like? Tell them to go say hallel. Right, the Rebbeinu Shem is going to take care of them. I told you I'm going to take care. I'm going to take you out of Mitzrayim. So, right, should be with a moon and bitachon. P.S. He says, "V'efshar losif al dvarav hakdoshim." I want to add something to what the Pnei Menachem said. Pnei Menachem was a Ger Rebbe, right? V'inei Rabbi Yehuda Halevi b'piyuto. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi in his piyuto Anoda Yom LeHabosha. Now I have it here. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi wrote incredible poetry. One of the poems that he wrote is, there's a custom, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but at a bris milah, this poem is sung. It's called Yom LaYabasha, right? It's if you look in your siddur when you go home, look in your art scroll siddur, go to bris milah, the brachas of bris milah, which will be after benching, after shachris, and you'll find the Sudat HaBrit. It'll have the poem of Yom LaYabasha in Hebrew and in English. And there's a lot of reference to the splitting of the sea. And there's a splitting and the idea of bris milah, because all of Bnei Israel did bris milah before they left Mitzrayim, right? So it's an incredible poetry from Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. And there's one line here that he's questioning the Pnei Menachem. At the end, it says, Yedidim Yeromamucha, your beloved exalt you. Beshira Kidmucha, they sang to you Kidmucha. So he's translating it, before the miracle of the Red Sea, before the miracle of Kriyas Yamsuf, right? Kidmucha, they sang to you before the Yamsuf was split, right? Mi kamocha Hashem ba'elim, right? Shira chadasha shivchu galim. This was the shira that they sang, right? So he's asking on this now. He says, it says in the Rabbi Yehuda Halevi wrote that they sang by the Kriyas Yamsuf, Shira Kidmucha. V'niskashu hameforshim, and the meforshim ask they're actually meforshim on the poetry of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, right? There's meforshim on the poetry of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. V'heichan matzinu shekidmu b'shir. Where do you see that they davened before? V'halo lo amru shira ela rak achar shenasa lehem hanes. They only sang shira az yashir Moshe after the nays of the Kriyas Yamsuf, right? Amna malpi dvar v'akdoshim shel maran ha'pnei menachem. But based on what the Pnei Menachem said, right? Ef shalomer, you can say like this: She'achar she'amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe Rabbeinu. After Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, Shelo yitpalel b'loshen tzaka. Don't come and daven to me with screaming and helplessness. Help us, right? Tzaka. Ela b'loshen rina. And he told them, that's what he told them to do. And bevadai kibel Moshe Rabbeinu advarim. Moshe clearly accepted this advice. Da'az miyad kibetz et kol ha'am, he gathered the people together. V'yachdav hipalu kulam b'loshen rina, and they all davened with joy, with simcha, with rina. V'zeh od kodem kriyat Yamsuf. This was before Kriyas Yamsuf. Valkein kasav Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, and that's what he wants to say. That's what Rabbi Yehuda Halevi means, right? Rabbi Yehuda Halevi b'shira kidmucha, that you preceded the event with shira. V'kavanato haita Larina was talking about the simcha, the joy. Hazu shaita kodem kriyat Yamsuf. Now you'll see that the English translation doesn't translate it that way, right? It just says, with song they come and greet you, right? To be mekadem, to be, but this is much more precise translation of the words of Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. And it could very well be that that's what Rabbi Yehuda Halevi had in mind. A beautiful, just an absolutely beautiful idea. But I want to take it another step further from something else that he wrote. I didn't think we'd have time for it, but we have a few minutes. I think we have 5 minutes or something like that. So I'm going to do it orally to you. He asks another couple of questions, 2 questions. He asks, the Medrash says, there's a Medrash. You might be familiar with this Medrash, that how do we know that even in vitro, the Jewish babies who weren't born yet were also singing Shira by Kriyas Yamsuf. It's a Medrash, a famous Medrash. It's based on a pasuk, Shenemar b'makelot Baruch Elokim Hashem mimkor Yisrael, that we blessed Hashem mimkor, from the makor of Yisrael, meaning from the womb, right? V'nei maimer zetzarchim. So he asked a question on this. What do you need this for? Hello, Yadua. You don't have this in front of you. Maybe I'll just try not to read it and just, Kodesh Baruch Hu doesn't do miracles, right? So we have to wonder, why would he do this extra kind of a wild thing? Why not by the Makos, when they daven for the Makos, or any other thing? Why dafka by Kriyas Yamsuf do you have this incredible miracle that the babies were also saying Shira, right? Then he has another medrash on the Kriyas Yamsuf. Dorish Rab Norai. By the way, the first medrash is Rabbi Meir, the second medrash is Rab Nehuroi, same person. Rab Nehuroi is because Nehorai, he enlightened the eyes of the Jewish people, Nehorai, La'or, with Torah, right, his Torah. But in any case, he says another thing, that when they were going through the sea, if a child was hungry, the mother would reach out and an apple tree would be there, and she would take an apple and give the child, or maybe even a baby bottle, right, for the child, right? They're 2 extraordinary. Why do we have, after by Kriyas Yamsuf, you have these wild nisim that take place, right? You don't have it by any other situation, right? Why is that? So he writes here, and one more thing he says, that the Medrash says, Rasa shifcha alayam mashalo ra Yecheskel hanavi. What a maidservant saw at the Kriyas Yamsuf, right? Prophets didn't see, right? It was such an extraordinary, what was so special, right? V'nira ba'omek inyanu, I want to say like this, kasher kfar amar leil, shekivin shegeula zot haita shorish kol ha'geulot yidua. This was the mother of all redemptions. Yetziat Mitzrayim is the source. That's why we say it every day in davening. Everything we do is Yetziat Mitzrayim. We have a whole Yom Tov which celebrates. Yetziat Mitzrayim is the mother of all redemption. Every redemption comes from the fact that the koach of redemption, that a Kodesh Baruch Hu loves us, right? It's a simcha that is beyond. It's a simcha that's beyond. And I'm just making it short. That's what he says. So dafka by Yetziat Mitzrayim. Now, I just want to add to that, based on something that Rav Hutner said. Rav Hutner asked a few questions also. First of all, when did the Kriyas Yamsuf take place? On the 7th day of Pesach, Shvi Shel Pesach, right? Why don't we have a special Yom Tov? Based on all of this, why do we have a special Yom Tov for Kriyas Yamsuf? Should have a special day, not just Shvi Shel Pesach, right? In fact, it's so important. We sing Az Yashir every morning in davening, right? That's how powerful it is. It's the greatest simcha, right, of our renewal. So why isn't there a special Yom Tov for Pesach? And something else he asks. When we say in davening, Shachris and Mariv, L'cha Anu Shira, and just like we sang by the sea, what do we say? Mi kamocha Yisrael, mi kamocha Yisrael, Ba'ilim, etc. Those two, that's possible. Who? Why dafka though? What about Oz Yashir? The whole Oz Yashir. Why do Chazal take that mi kamocha Be'elim Hashem? You'll take a look at the Siddur. Who is like you, Hashem? That's how we sang to Hashem. Why dafka there? So what he says is, and I make this short, he says that Shiras Hayam, the Az Yashir, was not just about the moment of Kriyat Yamsuf, but it was past and future. Right? We also, if you read the Az Yashir carefully, you see we praise God for the Beit HaMikdash, Yerushalayim, Eretz Yisrael. We're going to come to Eretz Yisrael. We'll come to Yerushalayim. We're going to have the Beit HaMikdash. It is a total simcha of Klal Yisrael, the history of Klal Yisrael, the protection of the redemption of Klal Yisrael. And Mi Kamocha, that's the bridge. That pasuk is the bridge from talking about the past miracles of the splitting of the sea, then going on to the future miracles of the rest of Jewish history that he's going to take us to Eretz Yisrael. So Kriyas Yamsuf so that's how he answers why there's no special day. You know why? And he says this, I might have done this a few years ago. He actually writes this in the Maimer, that this is not just a simcha of the moment, right? It's joie de vivre, he says in French. The joy of living. It's just not, you can't quantify Kriyat Yamsuf to a one-day celebration. We have to say Oz Yashir every single day of our lives. And we have all these extraordinary miracles that the Tolin Rebbe says happened that we don't see by anything else because of the extraordinary central nature of the simcha of the revelation, the redemption of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Okay, pleasure.